about a tyrant guilty of enormous human rights abuses, but possessed with weapons of mass destruction and an intention to use them as a state sponsor of terror. Absent that, I suspect the administration's course would have been to work to find more creative ways to constrain him than he had been constrained in the 90s. The president did have an enormous concern about the human rights abuses under Saddam Hussein. He also had a concern about the deterioration of the credibility of the United Nations, which had passed 16 resolutions calling upon him to abide by the outcome and the agreements that he made in the aftermath of the 91 and the first Gulf War that he had not lived up to. But absent weapons of mass destruction, no, I don't think there would have been.
I think Karl is right that the president would not, in fact, have gone to war if he had known what seems to have been the case, that Saddam had no real functioning weapons of mass destruction programs at the time. Having said that, so I think as an analytical matter, Karl's certainly right. The American political system wouldn't have supported it. No, I think it was right to go to war.
We're heading down the home stretch on questions from the audience. Take you over there first.
My question is for Mr. Jenkins or Weisberg. I ask you, we've had decades to judge these. Please name me the difficult and courageous decisions made by Lyndon Baines Johnson and Jimmy Carter that have been proven to be the right ones, please.
All right, and up here?
Simon and Jacob, how would you describe Bush's prosecution of the Iraq War, his rationale for the Iraq War, versus the rationale and prosecution of the Vietnam War by JFK, LBJ, and Nixon?
All right.
What differences do you see in how those two conflicts have been resolved?
It seems as though those two questions actually come together, so I'm going to go for a third one. The gentleman. Okay.
I'm curious if an aspect of the success of the Bush presidency is his foreign policy and his defending us against the terrorism, then how do you explain the fact that no one's caught Osama bin Laden at this point, the chief architect of the act that set all this off?
Karl, Rowe?
Because he is hiding in a deep, dark cave in a very dark corner of, in all likelihood, Pakistan. And to suggest that not every effort has been made to get him is inaccurate. Every effort has been made to get him, to get at his communications, to get at his allies, to get at his subordinates, to get at his inner circle. A lot of them are dead, and we aren't hearing much from him.
Simon and Jacob, you had two questions along the lines of comparisons of George Bush to both Presidents Kennedy and Johnson, with, I think, the implication that the president's Iraq was their Vietnam. Can you take on that question?
The occupation of Iraq was simply the most incompetent thing I've ever seen. It was stupefyingly incompetent. And I've no doubt at all that many people, possibly on the platform, wouldn't disagree with that, because it was conducted by a very small group of people against the advice of a much larger group of people within the administration. It simply has been a catastrophe. Afghanistan is much better conducted, although I think it's a much more difficult war to fight, and that's why I think it's going to end in greater tears than Iraq will end. Iraq is fairly simple to end. You just leave. It'll be very, very difficult to leave Afghanistan. But certainly in Vietnam, I think you had, on the whole, relatively competent military people there. They had experience of Korea, many of them. They lost, but they only just lost.
Jacob?
Just on LBJ, the questioner asked what courageous thing did he ever do? Just for starters, how about saying goodbye to the South, the Democratic Party, for generations, when he signed the Civil Rights Act in '64 and the Voting Rights Act in 1965? Johnson knew that would be the political consequence of that decision, and he did it anyway. To me, that's almost a definition of political courage. On judgment, however, I don't think Johnson does so well in Vietnam, and I think it's quite comparable to Bush. I think both of them were very poor. I think both of them were essentially unable to admit error, to recognize error, and to reverse error.
Okay, we're coming down to our last few minutes of questions, and I would like to make it a little bit forward-looking, and I just want to see if any of the hands up here have questions related to what President-elect Obama inherits from President Bush. Is anybody thinking along those lines quite clearly? And don't snooker me, because I'll squash your question if it's...
I think we all know that this motion won't really be decided here tonight, but it very well may be in 12 years, in 16 years, in 20 years. For those against the motion, can you paint us a picture of the world that would make your case?
Iraq as a functioning semi-democracy in the heart of the Middle East, as an example that would be a powerful antidote to the terrorist image of what the future ought to be like. Afghanistan stabilized, a continued decline in the ability of terrorist elements like Al-Qaeda to threaten the West. Okay, that's how it would look abroad.
Yes.
I, for one, am proud of the job President Bush has done to keep us safe and, in turn, the world. With that said, to speak in theories, what would you suggest that Barack Obama now do with Islamofascism, its threat to the world, and how is that different from the current policies that the Bush administration is employing?
I think Obama should focus, as he's appropriately doing, on Afghanistan and how to turn around a deteriorating situation there. I think he should figure out how to get us out of Iraq without Iraq falling back into the situation it was before the surge. It's true, we have not had another terrorist attack in the United States. How much of that is the result of policy? How much is the result of accident? We don't know that much about it. It's the dog that didn't bark. Would another president have handled it differently? I don't think so.
Simon Jenkins.
I imagine the reason why there have been no more attacks in America or in Britain or in most of Europe is because of good policing on the ground, not because you've been at war in the Middle East. It's not by going to war against other states. But the phrase Islamofascism, so easily bandied about from this side of the Atlantic, and I may say from Europe, when you travel in these countries, the relentlessness of the assumption that every Arab, every Muslim is a crypto-Islamofascist, and the evidence you give of it by going and invading some of their countries is the surest possible way to turn them into hostile. I cannot emphasize enough, these are normal people, by and large. They are people quite like you. They don't think, most of them, that they have a right to come and invade your country, close down Guantanamo Bay, do all the things they think you're doing wrong. There is now an assumption on the part of both your country and my country under Tony Blair that we have in some sense a right to go and sort out their countries because they're not like our countries. This must be one of the great fallacies of the modern age. I hope Obama overcomes it.
I didn't ascribe the term Islamofascism to everyone who's a Muslim or in that part of the world. I'm speaking about a specific group of people who have no intent but to do all Westerners harm. You've taken it beyond that, which is a great liberal elitist move to include everybody. But to the answer to my question, how does Barack Obama tackle it? And what does he do different from the current policies to be effective?
Well, I think that good relations with a country are more likely to get that country to suppress those elements within the country that are inclined to terrorism than bad relations with the country. That has to be true.
I'd like to quickly return to a question about why was America kept safe for 7 years. We're given two answers. One was luck, and the other was that any other president would have handled it the same way. Now, luck does come into play, but luck works when you have the kind of attitude that this president has, which is he's going to stay on the offense, so we fight him over there, and we're going to use every intelligence tool at our disposal to find out what they're up to. Now, maybe Jacob is right that any other president would have pursued the terrorist surveillance program and the widespread use of our intelligence assets abroad to listen in on the enemy. I hope he's right.
What do you mean, Karl, by fight them over there? They weren't in Iraq, unless you meant somewhere else by over there.
Well, first of all, again, I repeat, I appreciate your support for the war in Iraq at the time.
Well, I wasn't.
But let's be honest. He was supporting terrorists. This is a man who gave payments to terrorists.